Welcome to the channel. So we are in week 8 of Christ in all of Scriptures. We are going to start with the Old Testament passage. So this is Genesis 50:20. You planned evil against me. God planned it for good, to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. So there's a lot of things going on around this statement. This has to do with Joseph's story. So we'll get a little bit more into that. So we're highlighting any words or phrases that point to Christ. So God planned it for good to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. Make a note of any attributes of God seen in the text: faithful, good, omniscient, holy, immutable, infinite, and merciful. So let's start to go through this a little bit, and then I'll go back over to this side. So Joseph, if you go back and look at Joseph's story, you'll find that his brothers ended up putting him into a pit, and then they sold him as a slave to Egypt. So Joseph suffered for 13 years. He was thrown in prison. Lots of things happened to him. And he would not have been gifted with the 80 years of immense power and prestige that he received in Egypt without having gone through that suffering. So when you think about when you suffer, and that God can use that suffering for good. So the principle that God ultimately overrides human sin for his glory and the ultimate good of mankind. So if we look down here, we'll go through, underline the words you planned and God planned, and what differences do you see between these two plans? And circle the words that describe the differences between the two. So I underlined the you planned and the God planned, and I circled the words that describe the differences. So the words I circled were evil and good. Highlight the result of God's plan. What did God accomplish? So I didn't highlight because I already highlighted. So I just kind of underlined. The result of God's plan was the survival of many people. And then it says, consider the context of the passage. Who are the terms you and many people? So as we walk through this, there's a couple of different references here. So God planned it for good. If you look at Genesis 45:5-8 and Psalm 105:16-17. And then you planned evil against me. If you look at Genesis 37:4 and 18-20, you'll see more of the story of Joseph. If you have never looked at the story of Joseph, it's a really great one. And I'm thinking about possibly just doing a study on that. It's really interesting. It has a lot of pieces to it and a lot of things that happened, that God had happen for his good throughout that. And you can see all of those pieces fall into place according to God's plan. So the survival of many people, this is Joseph's family. They would have perished because God had brought a famine on. And because Joseph was in charge in Egypt, he knew this was happening because God told him. And so he had stored up food. So Joseph's family lived outside of Egypt. And so they would have perished without Joseph, and Jesus would have never come because Jesus is in the line of Jacob, who was their father. So they ask about who is the you and people. So the you planned evil, is Joseph's brothers. They did this because Joseph was his favorite child, Joseph, and because they were jealous of him. Now, they were originally going to kill him, but Reuben, who we just talked about in the other passage, he stopped the other brothers from killing him, which is how he ended up in the pit or cistern, and then how he got sold into slavery in Egypt. Now, after that, they did tell their father that Joseph was killed. So Jacob thought that Joseph was dead. So the you is Joseph's brothers, and the many people is believed to be the Israelites, and then again, also Joseph's family, so that Jesus would come. Romans 8:28, which this passage pointed to like all the places I did research. It says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for the good, for those who are called according to his purpose. So you will be seeing this theme throughout. All right, so we're going to move on to the New Testament. So the New Testament is Acts 2:22-24. Fellow Israelites, listen to the words. This Jesus of Nazareth was a man attested to you by God with miracles, wonders, and signs that God did among you through him, just as you yourselves know. Though he was delivered up according to God's determined plan and foreknowledge, you used lawless people to nail him to a cross and kill him. God raised him up, ending the pain of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by death. All right, so the first thing we did was highlight the words or phrases that point to Christ. So pretty much all of this points to Christ. We'll walk through that. Notes of attributes: sovereign, gracious, eternal, holy, incomprehensible, merciful, and patient. So when I did research on this passage, on this full passage of 22-24, it talks a lot about sovereignty, about the sovereignty of God. So that's why I highlighted that here. Underline what happened to Jesus in this passage. What did God do and what did the people do? So God determined plan and foreknowledge. The people nailed him to the cross to kill him. God raised him up from the dead. So again, God's showing his glory through Jesus. So he's showing the glory through Jesus through the wonders and signs and things that he's doing. He's delivering Jesus to fulfill his plan. He's raising Jesus from the dead. And the people nailed him to the cross and killed him. What was Christ's death in accordance with? Highlight the answer in the text. So not underline, I double underlined. So God determined plan and foreknowledge. So basically I said delivered according to God's plan for salvation and redemption. And then the result of Christ's resurrection is circled, ending the pains of death. So this was a sermon given by Peter at the Pentecost. If you read a little bit more of Acts 2, you'll find that the people witnessed the Holy Spirit come upon the apostles, and they really didn't understand it. So some of them thought, they were wicked and different things like that. They just didn't really understand it. So Peter took the opportunity to preach a sermon to explain the coming of the Spirit and the good news of the gospel, which is what these verses are. So the Jesus of Nazareth, this is actually the title on Jesus's cross. It says, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, John 19:19. So you can look that up if you like. Also pointing to that is Acts 22:8 and Matthew 2:23. In this version, it says, attested to you by God, and this basically just means approved by God. Some of the other verses here that you could point to are a lot in John, which is 5:36, 7:31, 10:37, and then also Hebrews 2:4. And signs that God did among you through him. So that's John 9:33. If you want to look up, talks about the signs and miracles and wonders. And then they talk about the lawless people. So they believed that the lawless people were not only the Israelites, but they also were the Gentile officials and the soldiers who crucified Jesus. His determining his plan and foreknowledge. You can look at Acts 3:18 and Jude 1-4. There's a lot of references here for ending the pain of death. Romans 4:24, 6:4, 14:9, 1 Corinthians 6:14, and 1 Peter 1:21. Because it is not possible for him to be held by death. So as they say, death couldn't hold him down. He was resurrected after 3 days. Isaiah 25:8, Hosea 13:14. So again, right, God works through evil to accomplish his divine plan and purposes. So we're again seeing that theme of God turns things of evil into good according to his plan and purposes. So that is week 8. Please let me know your thoughts, any comments that you might have. And I hope you are enjoying this study and the time spent together. Please be sure that you like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Looking forward to your comments. Have a blessed day.